1717, North Atlantic. A merchant ship spotted something just after dawn. A pirate vessel, drifting. No flags raised, no movement on deck, just floating, completely still, in waters that had dropped to near freezing overnight. They sent a rowboat. What they found on that ship has never made it into any pirate movie, any history book taught in schools, or any romanticized story about the golden age of piracy. 47 men, every single one dead. No battle, no storm, no enemy. The ship was completely intact. Sails still rigged, cannons still loaded, rum still in the barrels. They just stopped. The merchant captain wrote 3 words in his log that morning: "The cold won." This video is not about how pirates survived freezing nights at sea. This is about the ones who didn't. The ships that vanished between October and March and were never spoken of again. The deaths that got erased from history because they weren't dramatic enough to remember. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand that the real danger of being a pirate in 1715 wasn't the Navy, wasn't rival crews, wasn't even disease. It was a night that dropped below freezing when nobody was paying attention. Here is a number that historians rarely put in the same sentence as pirates: 40%. That is the average casualty rate among pirate crews who stayed in northern Atlantic waters, roughly above the Carolinas, past the month of October. Not 40% killed in battle, not 40% lost to disease, 40% dead from cold exposure in a single winter season. To put that into perspective, the most brutal naval battles of the same era averaged between 10 and 15% casualties. A freezing night at sea was nearly 3 times more deadly than a cannonball. And yet, almost nobody talks about it, because there is nothing romantic about men who froze to death in their hammocks. No enemy to blame, no dramatic last stand, just silence, and a ship drifting at dawn with nobody left to sail it. So why did so many crews get caught? Why didn't they just go south? The answer is greed, and it killed them in a very specific, very predictable way. Every experienced pirate captain in 1715 knew one rule above all others. When October comes, you go south. No debate, no delay. The Caribbean routes, the West African coast, the waters around the Azores. Warm, survivable, full of merchant traffic. A crew that went south in October lived. A crew that stayed north chasing one more prize. That crew had roughly a 40% chance of not making it to spring. So what made captains stay? The same thing that has gotten men killed in every era of human history. A ship on the horizon carrying something worth more than the risk. Late October 1715. A pirate captain, name lost to history, ship recorded only as a vessel seized off the coast of Massachusetts, spots a Dutch merchant ship carrying textiles, silver plate, and enough food stores to last his crew 6 months. He makes the call, one more raid, then south. It took 4 days. 4 days of chasing, boarding, stripping cargo, dealing with weather delays. By the time his ship was loaded and turned south, the temperature had dropped 12 degrees. His crew went into that night fed, wealthy, and completely unprepared for what was already happening to their bodies. Here is what nobody on that ship understood in 1715. Hypothermia doesn't announce itself. There is no moment where a man feels the cold take hold. No alarm, no sudden pain. It works like this. A body's core temperature starts dropping. The first thing that goes is fine motor control. Fingers stop cooperating, hands become clumsy, knots that a man has tied 10,000 times suddenly won't come together. Most men on deck wrote this off as tiredness. They had been working for days. Of course their hands were stiff. Then judgment goes. This is the part that makes hypothermia uniquely lethal. The brain starts misfiring before the body fully fails. Men become confused but feel completely certain they are thinking clearly. Decisions that would never pass in normal conditions feel logical. Sound, correct. Ship logs from the era are full of it. Captains making navigational errors they should have caught immediately. Watch officers failing to notice sails that needed adjustment. Men below deck reporting that they felt perfectly warm when their body temperature was already 2 degrees below normal. feeling warm when you are freezing to death. That specific symptom has a name in modern medicine: paradoxical undressing. The brain, misfiring catastrophically, sends signals that the body is overheating. Men in the final stages of hypothermia have been found having removed their own clothing, convinced they were burning up, in temperatures that were killing them. 3 ship logs from the winter of 1715 to 1717 record the same detail independently. Men found dead below deck, without their coats, in January in the North Atlantic. The cold didn't just kill them, it convinced them everything was fine, right up until it wasn't. In early spring 1718, a British naval vessel operating out of Charlestown, modern-day Charleston, South Carolina, intercepted what appeared to be an abandoned pirate sloop drifting roughly 200 miles offshore. The vessel was structurally sound, no damage, no signs of battle, rigging intact. Below deck they found 14 men, all dead, arranged, and this is the detail that disturbed the naval officers most, arranged in a rough circle, facing inward, as though gathered around something. There was nothing in the center of that circle. No fire, no object, nothing. The naval surgeon's report, partially preserved, offers the explanation that modern medicine confirms. In the final hours, as their core temperatures dropped past the point of return, those 14 men had gathered together instinctively, sharing body heat, the last functioning survival instinct in a brain that was already shutting down. They weren't panicking, they weren't fighting, they were perfectly calm, perfectly still, just 14 men sitting in a circle, getting quieter and quieter until the last one stopped. The naval captain ordered the vessel burned. He didn't record why, but his first officer, in a separate personal letter preserved in a British archive, wrote that the scene was, in his words, too orderly to look at for long. After cross-referencing ship logs, court records, and survivor testimonies from the golden age of piracy, 3 patterns show up in nearly every cold-weather death on record. The first mistake: they dried out the wrong things first. When a crew came in from a freezing watch soaked through, the instinct was to strip off outer layers and hang them to dry near the galley. Practical, logical. What they didn't know was that the process of wet wool drying pulls heat from the surrounding air. A below-deck space packed with drying clothes became measurably colder than one without them. Men sleeping in hammocks directly below drying wool woke up, if they woke up, colder than when they had gone to sleep. Several ship logs record a specific complaint from crew members that the quarters seemed colder at night than during the day. They were accidentally refrigerating their own sleeping quarters. The second mistake: they rationed rum at exactly the wrong moment. A captain watching his supplies on a delayed winter voyage made a rational call: cut the daily rum ration to make it last. The problem was that daily half pint of hot grog, mixed with boiling water, wasn't just morale. It was the only source of warm liquid most men consumed in a day. Take it away, and bodies that were already struggling to generate heat lost the one small thermal boost they had each morning. 3 separate records from winter voyages note that crew illnesses spiked noticeably within days of rum rations being cut. The captains assumed coincidence or spreading disease. The real reason was simpler and invisible. Their men were just colder than they had been the day before. The third mistake: they kept the sick away from the healthy. Basic quarantine logic: a sick man might be contagious. Keep him isolated, away from the crew. But in freezing conditions, isolation was a death sentence. A sick man, alone in a cold corner of the ship, had no body heat around him, no warmth to absorb, no human buffer between him and the cold leaking through the hull. Healthy men sleeping in groups shared enough heat to stay survivable. A sick man sleeping alone in the same temperature didn't. The quarantine that was meant to keep the crew safe from disease was quietly ensuring that the sick men died from something else entirely. So back to that ship, the one found drifting at dawn, 47 men, the cold one. Here is what the merchant captain almost certainly didn't know when he wrote those words. 12 of those 47 men had survived the night. By dawn, they were already below the point of recovery. But for several hours after the coldest part of the night, They were alive. How do we know? Because of one detail in the boarding party's report that historians have mostly overlooked. The ship's log, open on the captain's desk, the last entry written in a hand that had clearly struggled to form the letters. Wind holding from the north, men below, morning watch, and then nothing. Mid-sentence, mid-thought. The captain had been writing his log when he stopped being able to. He wasn't dramatic about it. He didn't write a final warning, a farewell, an accounting of what went wrong. He was just doing his job, right up until he couldn't. That is what cold does. It doesn't give you a moment to understand what is happening. It just quietly turns the lights off while you are still in the middle of a sentence. The golden age of piracy lasted roughly 30 years, 1680 to 1730. In that time, historians estimate that more pirates died from cold exposure in northern Atlantic waters than from all naval engagements combined. They don't get monuments. They don't get stories. Their ships don't have names that anyone remembers. They were just men who stayed north 1 week too long, chasing something worth more than the risk, and found out, on a quiet night with no wind and no warning, that the cold had been keeping a very precise count. If this video made you see the golden age of piracy differently, not as an adventure, but as a survival problem that most men eventually lost, hit subscribe. Because every video on this channel takes a moment in history that looks one way on the surface and pulls it apart until you see what was actually happening underneath.